Picture this. Your eyes glide across a page of immaculate Latin script, each letter formed with painstaking precision in deep black ink. The words speak of salvation, of Christ's teachings, and of divine order. Then your eyes pull back, and there it is, crammed into the narrow border. A bug-eyed creature with a distended belly is projectile vomiting into its own hands. Or maybe it's a rabbit jousting a snail. These aren't defaced pages of vandalism. This is exactly what the monks intended. The same hands that spend months perfecting every holy syllable deliberately fill the margins with the most absurd, profane, and sometimes genuinely disturbing images they could conceive. Preaching to geese, hybrid beasts that shouldn't exist, locked in perverse act, or death itself dancing with the living. The question lands hard. Why? These men had taken vows of silence, poverty, and devotion. Their entire existence revolved around copying and preserving sacred texts. They weren't edgy teenagers. They were the medieval world's most disciplined scholars. Yet given the chance to decorate the margins of their life's work, they unleashed something wild and unexplainable. Something that suggests the medieval mind was far stranger than what we've been taught. The margins weren't just decoration. They were a pressure valve, a confession, or maybe even a rebellion, and nobody is entirely sure which is which. Medieval monks lived under suffocating rules. Every waking hour was regimented, prayer at fixed intervals, silence during meals, constant surveillance by superiors, and the ever-present threat of eternal damnation for the smallest transgression. They copied texts about purity while their bodies reminded them that they were still flesh. They wrote about angels while their minds conjured darker things. The margins became the only space where those thoughts could exist without consequence. A demon drawn in the border wasn't heresy, it was decoration. A scatological joke wasn't blasphemy, it was just there, unexplained, technically separate from their holy words. These weren't conscious rebellions. The monks didn't sit down thinking they'd subvert the church. The images bubbled up from somewhere deeper. Freud would have had a field day with a nun harvesting fallers or a bishop being dragged to hell by demons. These were men marinating in sermons about eternal torture, about the body as a prison, about temptation lurking everywhere. They spent hours alone with their thoughts, copying descriptions of hell's torments in excruciating detail. That terror had to go somewhere. The margins became a dumping ground for everything the conscious mind couldn't process, be it sexual anxiety, fear of death, rage at authority, and confession about their own desires. The human brain can't function in a binary. You can't spend every moment focused on the divine without something else creeping in. The monsters in the margins weren't there despite the holy text. They needed the holy text to exist. The fear made the faith feel real. The grotesque made the sacred meaningful. Without demons in the borders, the words in the center were just words. But put them next to a creature vomiting its own intestines, and suddenly salvation feels urgent. The monks weren't decorating. They were managing their own psychological survival in a world that demanded they deny half of what it meant to be human. The knight versus snail appears in dozens of manuscripts and is genuinely baffling at first glance. A fully armored warrior, sometimes on horseback, locked in mortal combat with a snail. Sometimes the knight is retreating, sometimes he looks terrified. The snail, for its part, seems unbothered. Scholars have debated this for decades, but the most convincing theory points to social commentary. A group of medieval society looked down on. The image mocked aristocratic pretension. That is, your fancy armor means nothing. You're being bested by something that moves at a crawl. It was a joke about cowardice, about social climbing, and about people who talked big but accomplished little. Then there are the guileless figures, which were human faces grafted directly onto animal bodies with no neck and no transition. For instance, a bearded man's head on a chicken's leg, or a woman's face on a fish. These weren't monsters in the traditional sense. They were impossibilities, violations of nature's order that medieval people found deeply unsettling. They represented the fear of transformation, of losing your humanity, and of becoming something other. In a world where people genuinely believed in demonic possession and witches who could turn you into animals, these images hit different. They were warnings and fascinations rolled into one. The scatological images went beyond shock value. Monks drew bishops and nobles defecating, sometimes being force-fed by demons. Animals engaged in acts that would make modern viewers uncomfortable. These weren't random vulgarities. They communicated rage at corruption, at hypocrisy, and at the gap between what the powerful preached and how they lived. A bishop grabbing gold coins while peasants starved wasn't subtle, but it couldn't be spoken aloud. Other scribes saw it, copied it, and modified it. The images moved between monasteries like jokes passed in whispers, each one encoding a specific anxiety about power, about the body, and about what happens when the social order fails. They were memes before the internet, doing exactly what memes do, taking complex, dangerous ideas and making them transmissible through visual shorthand. Thank you for watching. Until the next one.